Welcome to the National Council on Interpreting for Healthcare monthly podcast, sponsored by the Standards and Training Committee. This podcast is intended for you, our members, the public at large, and everyone working to promote language access and social justice. Join our conversation with some of the most and best in our field and hear what they have to say about interpreting for healthcare. My name is Fabiola, and I am one of the directors of the board of NCIHC. Today, I am here with the wonderful John Arroyave. John is a first-generation Colombian American. He has interpreted since the age of 7, keenly aware of how communication impacts access to community services. John is a passionate advocate for ensuring interpreters are screened, trained, and qualified. A graduate of the University of Florida with an MBA from the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University, John spent over 10 years at top-tier consulting firms advising executives in the public and private sector on organizational structure, process improvement, and change management initiatives. Always passionately interested in T&I, 6 years ago, John took over the LSC, his dear late sister founded in Florida. Last year, John became the director at Cross-Cultural Communications, CCC. CCC is the only international training agency for community interpreting, educational interpreting, medical interpreting, cultural competence, and language access. Founded in 2001, CCC has designated curriculums and trained interpreters for over 20 years. With more than 400 licensed trainers in 43 US states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, and 6 countries, CCC is by far the largest interpreter training agency. That is very impressive. As the only national on-site and online training agency in the world devoted to training interpreters, CCC also develops textbooks that have become a standard in the profession. Globally, CCC is the only dedicated publisher of quality, comprehensive textbooks and workbooks for community and medical interpreting. Sold to 30 countries and all 50 US states, more than 90 colleges and universities have purchased CCC textbooks. This year, CCC is bringing to market 2 textbooks we believe will become a standard for educational institutions and professional interpreter training programs. The Remote Interpreter, an international textbook, a book that sets the international standard for remote interpreter education, will be published in the upcoming months. The Introduction to the Educational Interpreting and Translation will be published in the fall. In the coming months, CCC is also bringing to market the accompanying online training course for the Remote International Textbook, the Remote Interpreter Online, which has been developed in partnership with UpHealth. John is the youngest of 4, an uncle to 10 wonderful nephews and nieces, and a great uncle to one precious little one recently born to his eldest nephew. That is wonderful, John.
It's a mouthful. Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just got tired from reading all of that. Like, so many wonderful things that you are doing for our community. Like, thank you so much. I can speak from personal experience that I have used some of the resources that CCC has published, and they are amazing. And also,
Wonderful.
Our interpreters have been subscribed to the newsletter. So that is incredible.
Excellent. No, that's great to hear.
Yes.
That's really great to hear. Something that's gratifying.
Yeah. So, John, I'm very happy that you're here with us today. I'm just going to ask you a few questions and just get to know you better. I'm sure many of our listeners already know you because of all the work that you have done. But we're going to get like a little bit more personal, so to speak. I just want to hear your thoughts on different topics.
Excellent. Excellent. That's exciting. I'm so excited to be here. Just being on a podcast with NCIHC is a thrill. I've been in this profession, obviously, for a long time, but on a professional basis, really only the last 6 years. And I think the first professional organization I was really exposed to was NCIHC. And that's what you want to do in any profession, is learn about the professional organizations. So it's kind of like coming full circle. So I just had to say that. Thank you so much for the invitation, Fabiola.
So John, looking back, what are you most proud of?
Well, that's a really broad question. And I think ultimately, if I was going to whittle it down, what am I most proud of? I got into the LSC world. I took over my late sister's LSC about 6 years ago. And I had come from, let's say, a professional services background, consulting background, working for companies, and wasn't entirely happy, but I learned quite a lot. When I got into, on a professional basis, the T&I world, the first thing I was really struck by was how sort of segmented, unregulated, unstandardized the profession could really be. Maybe you have your freelancers that are more common languages that have some continuity, maybe have taken some courses, maybe there's the occasional certified interpreter, but then there's the middle of the night, indigenous language request interpreter that does it once a year, and they're really kind of doing it just for the community, but they've had no real training as an interpreter. And interpreting myself on a professional basis, you realize how deep I feel like when I interpret, sometimes for an hour, I feel like I've done the equivalent of 5 hours of work. I'm truly, truly drained. So just realizing how unstructured, unstandardized, how variable the levels of quality are within the interpreting world, just took me to the point of realizing that the core of what we need, I feel like, as a profession, is to really focus on ensuring, as best we can, kind of a uniform, high level of quality, as much as we can, realizing we're, at the end of the day, a mission-driven profession. But the more each interpreter can get trained, the more they can educate clients and stakeholders and interpret effectively. And that's going to have outcomes in students' lives and patients' lives and mental health patients' lives, and patients in mental health settings for decades. So it's going to have a downstream effect. So I think what I'm most proud of is the fact that kind of through fate, I found myself in this profession, this mission-driven profession that's truly, truly, I'm really struck by how awesomely capable interpreters. I'm truly intimidated by just the level of skill so many interpreters possess, and how noble and mission-driven they really are. So just the fact that I found myself back into this profession, and that maybe I have some skill sets and some background that would allow me to bring something to it, has been really a thrill. I wake up excited, and kind of through that, I met Marjorie Bancroft 3 years ago at a conference, and kind of through that, and maybe she recognized some of that in me. I was drawn towards organizations that were focused, like NCIHC, like CCC, focused on trying to standardize. I won't say centralize, but that kind of gets at what I'm alluding to, trying to allow a uniform, trying to move the profession forward, in effect. So just to summarize, it's a lot of different things, but what am I most proud of? I'm most proud of finding myself in this profession. I'm truly in awe of interpreters. I interpret regularly. It's been a little bit, but finding myself in this profession, and then finding myself in CCC, in an organization that really contributes, that tries to bring together experts to standardize and publish these studies so we can get it out there to as many people as possible. I can only imagine, let's say I got into the profession 6 years ago. My late sister got into the profession almost 30 years ago. She's gone now, but it was almost 30 years ago. And she was incredibly talented, but she would be thrown into situations working for large OPI providers, where she's taking a 911 call, and then she's taking a doctor's visit call. And the only training she was provided was, there wasn't much in terms of the profession. It was all behind the back doors of large companies, what they decided she needed. Luckily, she found her way to professional organizations and court certification, and was really able to empower herself to, demand a higher wage, make a living wage, have better working conditions, have more standardized environments where, she wasn't being parachuted into these situations with no context. But yeah. So just to summarize, I know that was quite a lot, but it's all kind of been a confluence of things in my life that have brought me here, and it's thrilling to be here as well. So talking with you, Fabiola.
Awesome. I'm sorry for your loss, but from listening to you, I can tell that that you're keeping your sister's spirit alive in the work that you're doing, and that is amazing. Like, not only you are connected to the work, and you're using all your skills to do a lot for our community, but at the same time, I think what makes you excel is that push of also having that emotional connection
A little bit
to the work. That is incredible. And the fact that Marjorie saw that potential in you, right? So you could, take over for her. That says volumes of the person that you are, because we all know that Marjorie is an incredible trainer, has done so much for our interpreting community.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You can't say enough good things about Marjorie. She's really exceptional.
Yes, she truly is. So, John, now, currently, what do you see as the biggest challenge?
Currently, well, that's another broad question. I love the big questions. One of the things you hear a lot about right now, and this may be a little bit controversial, and it's important as a profession we address it, and think about it. I don't think, it's just an opinion, I don't think there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence. I don't think that's, let's say, the biggest challenge. Maybe a lot of people in our profession would put it as the biggest challenge. I don't. It's certainly a big question mark. We don't know how things will unfold. We don't know what segments are kind of susceptible to it, which aren't. There's certainly a lot of regulation that puts in place language access laws. What I do know in terms of AIs, for example, self-driving cars. If you think about self-driving cars, to use an example, they don't have to be 99.9% reliable. They have to be 100% reliable, because you can't most of the time avoid the pedestrian. You have to always avoid the pedestrian. So that creates a lot of oversight risk. So there's been a lot of trouble. Self-driving cars, we were supposed to have them. They were supposed to be ubiquitous several years ago. They're not. The technology's there. It's just how it unfolds, how they're rolled out is always a complicated story. I don't know if we'll ever get there. We may. Same goes for, let's say, the interpreting profession. It would require so much oversight if AI was starting to use it in a lot of areas. There's certainly potentially some areas. So just drawing that parallel, I think the biggest challenge is a challenge each and every interpreter faces in terms of professional development. What we want to do as a profession is become more aligned with professional services, in the sense of each interpreter, getting back to the CCC bit, but really each interpreter joining professional organizations, becoming empowered, and taking their training, developing their skill set, learning, educating, because that's how we're going to educate stakeholders That's how we're going to educate clients. That's how we're going to have a really positive impact on outcomes. So personally, I see the biggest challenge as ensuring every interpreter across the board is focused on empowering themselves, developing their skill set as an interpreter, which it's, I work with staff interpreters at hospitals, and I'm just astonished, what you do, Fabiola, day in and day out, right? You get a list of clients, and, it's all different providers, it's all different patient histories. It's all different scenarios. Some are predictable, some aren't. Just the level of terminology. So how many doctors are seeing that varied a level of patients? And so I can only imagine the level of training and practice and review, and just ability to perform in the moment that an interpreter has to bring. So that takes a lot of preparation. And then there's staff interpreters, but then there's freelance interpreters as well that have to respond at a moment's notice. There's remote interpreters that are parachuted in to scenarios all over the world. So, if we can work to continue to professionalize and show the value of interpreting, we can demand higher wages. Everyone can be more empowered. We can all be better advocates for the profession. So how do we get globally, it's such an enormous industry. How do we get more interpreters, more empowered, more thought leaders? I think there's so much work to be done. What do I see as the biggest challenge is really ensuring, when someone comes into the interpreting profession, they're doing it for the right reasons. It's a mission-driven profession, but it should be fairly compensated. I heard a statistic not too long ago where 66% of freelance interpreters their first year don't make enough money to pay their bills. And I think that perhaps is probably kind of underestimated. We want all interpreters to make enough. And the way we do that is really investing in your personal brand as an interpreter, with your skill set, with a LinkedIn profile, with professional organizations, with training, and with client education,
Yeah.
So.
And I was going to say, that first year of starting your career as an interpreter comes with many different expenses. Some hospitals require vaccines or labs. Then on top of that, if you are somebody that is committed to providing great service, then probably you want to complete a 40-hour training at least. And if you're an independent contractor, that's going to come out of pocket. So all those things, as you said, I totally agree with you that is really a big challenge. If you're not making ends meet, how are you going to then find a way to get certified, to get training, etc.? And I also think your comment about AI is on point. I think we still have a long way to get to the point where it can be used in the medical setting. So I think right now, what we really should be focusing on is how us as interpreters use the technology to provide better service. I was having these conversations with our interpreters recently, that it's maybe it can be that if we get the technology to be HIPAA compliant, we could have a live transcription of what is being said, and then we can use that as reference as we are interpreting. Instead of taking notes, we could just look at it and say, oh, okay, this is what they said because I couldn't hear very well, right? So just instead of being afraid of it, just think about how we can use it to our advantage. And the other thing that I find very interesting is, and you're an interpreter, so you know this, that sometimes at the beginning of the encounter, we interpret a sentence or a word in a certain way because of the context. We thought that's what it was. And then as you move forward in the conversation and you get more context, that you're wait a second, that's not what they said. And I think AI technology doesn't have the capacity to say, wait, did I make a mistake? oh, wait, what I told you earlier, that wasn't it. Now this is this other thing, right? So I think like all those little nuances, I think they still need to be worked out before we can get to that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, ultimately, a person's language is so bound up with their identity. It's tough to believe that something that's based on ones and zeros can really develop understanding, instinct. I mean, these are very different things. Understanding, instinct, a notion of what's going on. I mean, that's how we know if we need to, that's the first indication, hey, there's a misunderstanding there. I'm going to let this conversation play out to a certain point, but if the misunderstanding doesn't clarify, if the conversation doesn't clarify the misunderstanding, I need to mediate.
Exactly. Like reading the room.
And then you realize, oh, no, I need to strategically mediate. And then maybe there's probably some advocacy going on here because, it could go in any direction. And just relying on something that's based on ones and zeros is it's too much.
And earlier you were talking about like, as interpreters, we get dropped into so many different situations, right? And like how important training is. And if you only think about, like, I think often people focus on terminology, like knowing the terminology, but so much of our work is session management in itself. And, like those interventions, as you were just saying, it's like, hey, how do I need to develop that awareness that I'm reading the room and there's something that is not, maybe it's not coming across as I was supposed to. And then how do I intervene in a way that is not affecting the flow of communication, right? And then if you work in a pediatric setting, like you have language discordant families. So like you're not only, helping one person communicate, but now you have like maybe three that have different needs, right? So all of that is extremely tricky.
And conveying just the level of complexity that an interpreter with your skill set is able to manage, and that's just one encounter of dozens upon dozens on a daily basis. It's remarkable. I'm always in awe of interpreters like you. So I don't see, granted, it's something that needs to be addressed, and it is people like, there's the initiative Safe AI, which I encourage everyone to get involved with. I'm just voicing kind of a sense for what you do and what ones and zeros is capable of doing, and I just don't see it ever bridging that gap.
So, John, looking forward, what would you love to see happen?
Yeah, no, I think we've been talking about it in terms of, I want to see interpreters across the board more empowered, more LinkedIn profiles. You are professionals. This is a professional service. It's incredibly complex. It's incredibly nuanced. It's incredibly challenging. It's an incredible skill set that honestly very few people actually can develop. So I would love to see interpreters becoming more empowered so that they can demand higher wages and demonstrate, maybe demand is not the right word, but really advocate for higher wages because they're delivering so much value, showing that, what we do has an impact in people's lives on their outcomes for decades. Frequently, I think of, educational interpreting, pre-K, Head Start, all the referrals that come from healthcare settings to the Head Start programs. The interpreters helping with the evaluation there and the IEPs and that are with students sometimes from pre-K all the way through high school. And that's really life shaping, not only for obviously the patient, but also the patient's family. Because what are we doing? We're kind of giving them our voice so that they could have their communicative autonomy, which is, so critical to their well-being, to their dignity. So what would I love to see happen? We talked about interpreter empowerment. I want to see, I want to see, CCC continue to produce good work, to bring together experts. There's certainly a number of organizations that are doing good work as well. So I want to see more interpreter empowerment. I want to see interpreters get connected with colleagues, join professional organizations. And that way, so we can start to move the profession more and more towards being a professional service versus being thought of as a commodity. And that requires the staff interpreters, the remote interpreters, the freelance interpreters that are incrementally, through the good work that they do, through their knowledge base, educating, patients, clients about their rights as well as staff at the facilities where they do work. So it's a whole ecosystem that we need to continue to move forward as a profession. I want to see more certifications, within the educational space, within maybe community interpreting internationally. So I just want to see the profession move forward. And that to that end, the textbook, The Remote Interpreting, we're trying to, with remarkable authors like, of course, Catherine Allen, among, Daniel Metter, Caroline Remmer, Sarah Stockler-Rags, Tatiana, at Upheld Dieter at Buslingo. They spent 4 years, 4 years, creating a textbook, 2 volumes. It's going to be about well over 1,000, both volumes. The first volume is 650 pages. And so we're just trying to, I'm not saying everyone needs to memorize the entire textbook, but what is the core essentials that we as interpreters, as a profession, everyone should have? It should be centralized in the profession. It shouldn't be behind closed doors at a big company. If there's one thing I wish everyone would read, every interpreter, would probably be the chapter on ethics, chapter 6 in TRI. Marjorie Bancroft went through 100 different codes of ethics internationally.
Wow.
And she distilled it to what is the absolute core of our profession. It's a 90-page chapter. It's basically a book on its own. Maybe down the road, we'll be able to publish it independently. But that in itself is a remarkable achievement. But these authors working together for so long, week in, week out, editing each other's work, it produced something that's, I think, up to this point, kind of remarkable achievement that moves the profession forward. So I'm in a lot of awe of what these authors have selflessly contributed. And ultimately, it's all in service of the profession. What we love is the interpreting profession. It's a mission-driven profession. It's a noble profession. And so yeah.
And I think, so talking about the code of ethics, and standards of practice, I think that is going to be so important for us, moving forward, to have that knowledge of what other institutions have agreed that they want to do as far as the code of ethics goes, and then kind of think about, okay, so what is it that it matters to all of us? What are our goals in general, right? And then think about, now that we have remote interpreting, now that we have AI, now that our profession has grown, then now what does make sense as far as the code of ethics and standards of practice go? So I think that I personally, I'm going to read that chapter, because I think that's going to definitely help me have a good foundation, right? When I have these conversations about what makes sense moving forward. So that is incredible. Yeah. And I totally agree with you when it comes to certifications. I think they should be either additional training or certification for pediatric interpreters working in pediatrics. Because of the complexity. Exactly, because of the complexity of session management, right? And myself, I have a child that was diagnosed with autism. So now I see it in a different way, because I've been there. I've been in the shoes of a parent that has a child with special needs, and I can speak both languages, and it's still overwhelming sometimes. to understand, right, the complexities of the healthcare system. So I can't even imagine a parent that doesn't speak the language trying to navigate and provide what is best for that child. So that's why now, like, I have that commitment to, I really want to help interpreters working in pediatric be amazing at what they do, because I want those parents to have the best, outcome possible.
Absolutely.
So I totally connect with you. Yeah.
I mean, so much of what you said just shows your profound love of the profession. It takes someone that's mission driven and just noble in a different way to really do it and excel at it.
That's what we were talking about in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, excel at it the way you do. So no, that's remarkable. That's remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah, and that, like, that's when I was listening to you at the beginning when you were talking about like your connection to the work. I was like, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. That having that passion for it makes you be even better at what you do because you're so committed to it. Well, John, thank you very much for spending time with me today and having these conversations. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Join us again next month as we discuss what's happening and how to improve interpreting for healthcare.